In this tutorial, I will show you a couple of easy ways to enhance someone's eyes. I'm going to go ahead and turn off these layers so you can see what our starting point looks like. There you go. Now this image is pretty well lit, but as you can see, compared to the finished product, it lacks that pop that we're looking for. Now before we start going into enhancing the eyes, I want to make sure that all the elements I need are there. Sometimes depending on the angle of the model to the light source, you'll get a diminished catch light. I like to keep it a little bit symmetrical, so what I do is a simple cut and paste. So to copy this catch light over to the other eye, I'm just going to do a simple selection with the lasso tool with a 3-pixel feather, and I'm just going to do a rough selection around that catch light. Hit Command J, Control J on a PC, and jump it to a new layer. Zoom out a bit. Hit V on your keyboard for move. I'm going to move that catch light over to the other side. Zoom in on that other eye. Command T or Control T to transform it. We're going to rotate it to get the right rotation on it, right angle on it. And we're also going to shrink it down a little bit. So right about there. We're going to reposition that. And as you can see, it blends in perfectly. Before and after right here. So a little bit more prominent catch light on that eye. Now I'd like to handle the sclera and whitening that. Looks a little red, maybe she didn't get enough rest the night before. It's natural for eyes to have red veins in it. Those are blood vessels. We want to diminish those and not really get rid of them. For the most part, unless they're very, very prominent veins, you can usually just get away with doing a hue saturation layer and just desaturating the reds and the yellows. What we'll do is we'll take the lasso tool and make sure that this is selected, which means add to selection. That way you can just keep selecting without losing your previous selection. We're going to feather it, 10 pixels. So I just want to point out that we are working on a full resolution image. It is not a web-sized image, so I'm using settings that correspond to working on an actual full resolution image. When selecting the sclera of the eye, most people do this and select the entire sclera. The problem with that is you're not taking into account the shadows caused by your light source on the eye itself. Because my main lighting source is coming from the top, her eyelashes will cast a shadow on the eye naturally, and we need to take that into account. And this time I want you to see how I select in order to take into account that shadow I was referring to. You can see here, this is so much brighter than right under the upper eyelid. And that follows a curve here because it's a shadow cast by the top lashes. So, if you look carefully, it actually starts here. And this is the only part we're going to lighten up. Now you can see I made a selection and it selected the eye, so you're going to hold down the Option or Alt key and deselect the eye. And you can fine tune it any way you want. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be exact, because since it's feathered, it will blend in quite naturally. When the subject is turned at an angle to your main light, I like to just do one sclera at a time and not both of them simultaneously, because you have to compensate for the fact that this eye on the right is further away from the light source than this eye on the left. So that should be slightly darker than this eye. So what we're going to do is in your adjustment palette here, we're going to select Hue and Saturation. You're going to pull down the menu and we're just going to adjust the reds. Pull down the saturation until you see the reds are gone. Sometimes you'll also need to do the yellows, and it depends. Go back to your master, and now we're going to adjust lightness. I'm just going to do an extreme adjustment here just so you can see the difference. And you can see the shadow that was cast by the eyelashes. And this gives a three-dimensional quality to your eye. For something like this, usually something like a 20 on your lightness slider is perfect. So we're going to keep it at that. Now we're going to focus on the other eye. Same procedure. We're just selecting the part of the sclera that is lit by the main light source. I'm not selecting anything higher than this. New hue saturation layer, same thing. Adjust the reds first, the yellows, and then your master. Now we did the other one at 20. If you do this one at 20 and zoom out, this has the same prominence as this. But remember, I want to take into account the fact that this eye is further than this eye. So I'm going to drop this down to 15 to get a more natural looking eye whitening. Now we're ready to tackle enhancing the colored part of the eye, or the iris. There's a couple of ways that I do it. I'm sure there's a million ways you can do it. But the most effective and easiest way that I've found is to simply select the iris with a feathered lasso. Let's do a 5 pixel feather because I want to keep it nice and fairly defined. And again, your selections don't have to be super precise. The feather will take care of that for you. So something like that is perfect. And we're going to do it to the other eye as well. We're going to go to our adjustment palette and select a curves adjustment layer. We're going to zoom in. We're going to select the lightest part of the iris. So it's this area right here. We're going to punch that up. It's all right about there. It's good. Now we're going to select the dark part of the iris and slide that down. Now you can see all the color striations are enhanced, giving the eye beautiful color, contrast, and also some three-dimensionality. I'm going to show you before and after of that. And that in and of itself is really enough. I'm going to show you another technique which you can use in addition to this or instead of this. Go back to your adjustment palette. I'm going to select a new curves layer. You're going to change the blending mode to linear dodge, and you can see how much it lightens up. That's what it looks like. Obviously it looks horrendous, but we're not leaving it there. You're going to invert the mask by hitting Command I. You're going to take a brush, and again, I preset most of my brushes and other tools just to make things more efficient during my retouch. So I have one for the iris, which is right here, and that brush is a 5 pixel brush that is at 100% hardness, 100% opacity, and 100% flow. I'm going to make sure that I have white as my foreground color, and I'm going to paint in with white on the curves mask. It's going to reveal that brightness that we saw earlier before we inverted the mask. Where do you paint? Okay, well, you're just basically enhancing the lighter parts of the eye. You don't have to do an exact tracing of it. In fact, the more random it is, the better. All I do are quick, short brush strokes in an arc to enhance the fact that the eye is spherical. So this is all I do. You can enhance little spots. You can really do anything you want. Same thing with the other eye. The more random, really, the better. That doesn't look too great right now. In fact, it looks really weird. What we're going to do is we're going to blur this mask. Make sure your mask is selected. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And we're going to blur it until we get to a nice feathering. So for this, it looks like maybe between 6 to 7 pixels is pretty nice. I'm just going to zoom in, click OK. You can see how much more detail in the iris that you were able to get. We're not going to stop there. That's a little too bright, so we're going to knock down the opacity. And just bring it up slowly till we get a nice coloration. I think that's quite nice right there. Maybe up 47%. Now it's time to tackle the lashes. And the way I like to do it is just to retrace over the lashes themselves by creating an empty layer and selecting a small hard brush. I have an eyelash brush which is actually identical to the iris brush that we used, and it's just a 5 pixel brush with 100% hardness and 100% opacity and flow. And the key to doing it is to not paint with black, because if you paint with black it becomes too prominent and too unnatural, because nobody has totally black eyelashes. So what we will do is we're going to select an eyelash color with the color picker. You can see the bottom is black and my new color is actually a very deep gray. I'm just going to trace here with some arced brush strokes from the root of the lash all the way to the tip. For you girls out there, it's just like, I guess, putting on mascara on your lashes. Another great tip to doing lashes is to really just pay attention to how the lashes are structured. Eyelashes are usually grouped into 3 or 4 lashes, and you can see right here, it's a grouping of lashes. And you're just tracing over it, and it doesn't have to be exact. It really doesn't. You can notice as we get here, it starts to look a little bit blue. That's because we selected this color up here. So when that happens, and you want to maintain a certain uniformity in color, we're going to select here, and you can see the new color is actually a bit more brown. As we zoom out, you can see the lashes look a lot more full. I'm going to do it to the other side as well. There you go. What we're going to do is we're going to blur these brush strokes to make them blend more naturally into the existing lashes. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur. This time, half a pixel is really enough. You can see they're not as sharp anymore. And not only that, we're also going to lower the opacity. I always like to start at 0 and just adjust until I get the right opacity. It's 29%, it's 46%. So right about there at 60%, I'm pretty happy with that. And here's a before and after of the entire eye retouch. And that's how I go about retouching eyes. Thanks for watching, everybody, and stay tuned for more upcoming mini Photoshop tutorials.